Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, the space where we talk about what actually happens behind the metrics, the numbers, the targets, the pitch decks, and the LinkedIn flex process. Um, Now, I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are going to zoom in on something most of us were never taught in business school or in corporate training. Now, what a nervous system is doing while you are trying to hit targets, sit through performance reviews, or post that I'm thrilled to announce update on LinkedIn. And if you have ever had a boss who made your heart race for all the wrong reasons, if you have ever stared at your laptop maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday night with that quiet dread on your chest. And if you left corporate, but somehow you took the anxiety with you into your so called freedom, that is something that I can so much relate with, listeners. You're not broken. We are not broken. Our brain is running a pattern it thinks that is keeping you alive. So let me introduce my guest to all of you. She lives at this exact intersection of brain science and business. Meet my lovely guest, Shannon Smith. She is a Harvard ex neuroscience researcher and former Microsoft leader who has been in the trenches with toxic bosses and political workplaces. But instead of just ranting about it, she builds frameworks. The toxic boss immune system for professionals is actually who it's for the professionals who feel trapped, and also a brain based sales system for solopreneurs and founders who actually want to use LinkedIn as a real revenue engine without feeling slimy. So, listeners, let's get down to this real conversation because we are going to talk about what is happening in your brain when you freeze in a meeting, why your nervous system sometimes prefers a toxic boss or a toxic workplace over uncertainty, and how to build freedom without burning yourself out all over again. So, if you are listening at your desk or maybe while driving your car or between calls, this one is actually for the part of you that is tired, fed up of performing, and ready to feel safe, clear, and in control of your own career. So, Shannon, welcome to BizBlend, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Totally, totally. I think, when I was doing the intro, something that really, really hit me very hard, Shannon, is this, and it's kind of it kind of gave me that call back to the Stockholm syndrome thing that somehow, whether it's our wiring or programming, our brain thinks that sticking with a toxic workplace or a toxic, boss is safer than being in uncertainty or being in that situation of an unstable paycheck. So I think this is so much important to talk about because there are so many factors and systems that they're playing role in here. Because we often kind of, shift the blame either on our own incapability or maybe the situation or the surroundings. But I think there's so many factors playing here. So this conversation is going to be really, really exciting.
Thank you so much for that. And you are spot on. We humans are an interesting species. This applies in sales, it applies in your job, it applies in your relationship, but our brain does not just prefer certainty, it craves it. And when we don't have certainty, we don't feel safe, even if that certainty is a situation that's making us physically ill. And I've had clients who were physically ill from their toxic environments at work, especially in academia. And so, despite that kind of warning sign, when your body is sending off all the alarms, the preference is still that certainty. And that's just how we are wired. And that applies in sales. If you have ever been thinking about selling anything or buying anything, rather, you're not going to be buying anything unless you have certainty on all front. That's just the way the brain works. So, yeah, there's so many interesting parallels too, but you're spot on. Certainty can help us or can hurt us depending on the situation.
Agree, agreed. Okay, so Sharon, very interesting. You talk about something which is corporate control. Um, so I'm really, and I think our listeners will also be very curious to know, like, what is actually happening in the brain and the nervous system of someone working under, as you know, mentioned, you described toxic or highly controlling boss or workplace.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the science behind it and then we'll get into some stories. But I know that 87%, according to a study, I think it was by McKinsey, have
Mhm.
worked for a toxic boss sometime in their career. A third of them currently have a toxic boss, though I think the majority of us out there can really relate to that scenario. I mean, Sunday Scaries, everybody knows what that is for a reason. So, when you have a toxic boss or coworker, something like that, your body and your brain is detecting a threat. Now, the threat, the amygdala, the limbic system, it used to sort of pick up on, way in the way back when the saber-toothed tigers or, maybe somebody else was coming at you with a spear. But nowadays, the safety perception has shifted to where am I safe at work or am I safe driving a car? Or that's why a lot of people go into overdrive with anxiety as well. There's not really any real danger, but we are just wired to constantly scan for threats. So when we find one and we know there's one, then our body prepares for that threat. The amygdala is activated. Your nervous system is stressed out. You're constantly on the defense. Your heart rate, your pulse, you're sweating, all to try to protect you. And it's funny because a lot of times when toxic bosses are doing this, 99% of the time, it's not really even about you. It's about them and their own insecurities and needs and drives for control. But each of the people's nervous systems are reacting in different ways to serve both of their needs. Just getting two sides of the coin. But yeah, I mean, I'll share a couple stories. I had a boss who was upset that it took me 7 minutes to do a task, a whole 7 minutes,
Oh,
just
okay.
because we all have these war stories, right? And then another instance where I was writing communications for big tech, and it was being reviewed, and I was docked because the space was the wrong font. The space. So nothing against space, but the space was the wrong font. So whenever you are constantly fielding these kind of threats, it takes a toll, a serious toll on your health, your mental health, on all of it. And your body's just trying to protect itself, um, even if it feels safer than going out there and being in uncertainty.
And, I mean, especially the Sunday one, that is so, so relatable for me because, oh my goodness, I mean, when you have that fear in your mind, okay, tomorrow is my review meeting, um, weekly review meeting. Okay, I haven't achieved what I had maybe committed or maybe what was given to me. How exactly? Like your brain is preparing you that, okay, so now somehow you have to just go through that meeting, do something, think about something, and in that entire process, the entire, your weekend is gone. Your weekend is gone. I mean, people may think that, it's ridiculous, but I think your entire weekend is gone. You do not, I never used to feel hungry when, I used to think about my review meetings. Um,
Mm.
and then at the same time, when everything was, let's say I've achieved my numbers and everything, I used to feel like, and at that time also, I used to think about, okay, I'm saved for this Monday. What would happen for the next coming Mondays? I have to be prepared for that also. So yeah, that is so, so relatable. What you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, that I mean, I don't have to say that that kind of interaction is unhealthy really for everybody, but for the organization as a whole, because when you are just in that survival mode and you're just trying to hang in there, you're not going to be feeling that psychological safety. You're not going to be creative. You're not going to be innovative. And I bet you $500, if you went through all the company's mission statements, there's at least a word innovative or like cutting edge in there somewhere. So, in order to really be innovative, you have to create that psychological safety for your employees. And if there is a toxic boss in leadership, that's going to be near impossible to do, which is ultimately going to damage the performance of the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no nuance in there. Um, and
Yeah.
also, Shannon, you have created something which is called the Toxic Boss Immune Framework. Now, for someone who is actually stuck in a rough workplace right now, but then at the same time, it's kind of this um, thought or that feeling that I do not have that privilege or option to leave this because once again, connecting to what we began to discuss, that it's the stability that we crave for. I do not have option to leave. So how what kind of, first two or maybe three practical moves you would have them make this week or immediately?
Yeah. Great question. A couple that are pretty well known and very easy to implement tomorrow would be identifying triggers through just being aware of your body. So, because of how we're wired, we tense up if there's a threat, maybe even without realizing it. So, if you have a tight chest, if your jaw's clenched, if your breathing starts to become more shallow, then, that's signaling from your insula that there is a threat happening. So if you notice some of those things or, palms are sweaty, heart rate, all of that, try to be aware in your body and at least identify that it's happening. And then you can label it, which is a way to de escalate what your body's doing, trying to be that objective observer. So it's so interesting because a lot of these sort of tactics also exist in like sort of Eastern philosophy, like meditation. But now there's so much science out there that shows how meditation and being an objective observer and having awareness in your body impacts your brain, your heart rate, your parasympathetic nervous system. So there is legitimacy to it. And as we are advancing our science, we're able to empirically prove that. So, identifying the triggers through your body awareness, labeling them, and then trying to be that objective observer. Because if you can kind of get away from being immediately in that position, then maybe you can start to sort of identify, okay, the boss is trying to publicly humiliate me. So this is not about me. This is some need that this person has, and it's actually not personal. And so if you can start to get some distance between yourself in the situation while it's happening, then you're going to be more calm, your body's going to be more regulated, and you're going to be able to respond instead of react.
Hmm. I like that in that distinction. Respond instead of react. Hmm.
Yeah.
And uh, you know, many people, and then I've like gone through these conversations on so many different platforms. Like, people who are sharing that, I have this, have that. These are the issues that I'm facing, especially with maybe the management or the leadership or the workplace. People would say that just leave, just leave.
Yeah.
If you think that this is not the right fit for you, the workplace, or maybe your boss is toxic, and you think that that is really detrimental to your not only your career but your holistic self, just leave. um, how, to what extent do you justify, Shannon, that we still have that option to look out for better workplaces? Because there are, for the fact, I have had the opportunity to work with some really good um, managers who I can say that they are really good leaders, because um, they actually helped me understand ways in which I could be creative in terms of looking at challenges, just not from a solving perspective, but from actually thinking from all the different sides. And that only came, when I got that comfort, or I got that at least trust that yes, I do have that liberty to think creatively.
A couple of things are kind of popping up. First and foremost, I want to talk about a fun study where they brought, and then I want to keep your question, but and so make sure I come back to your question. But they brought these kids in, and they brought with their mothers, and so the first sort of condition was, okay, the kids in there with their mom. They're like 2 or 3 years old, and there's a whole bunch of toys there. So we observe what's going on while the mom and the kid are there. Kid plays with the toys. The mom leaves in the second condition for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. What happened? The child stopped playing with the toys and was very concerned with where the mother went. That's that sense of safety and psychological safety that we're seeking out our workplace. And so if we, like you said, don't have that comfort, we cannot sit there and be creative like we are meant to be to ultimately help the organization. In
Mm.
terms of what you were asking about leaving,
Mhm.
this life, everybody has to make their own decisions. Another another point, which is also a tactic, is to instead of really think, why is this happening to me? Think about, why is this happening for me? Because with some amount of adversity, you're going to build up your resilience. Another fun rat study, if you want to talk about that. But if you have a moderate amount, not too much, not too little of adversity, then you can build your resilience. So if you decide the job is a part of your experience on earth, then you can make the choice of, this is somehow, I'm learning something from this, or maybe there's some adversity I could grow from here. I'm going through this for some kind of reason, versus kind of just collapsing into a fetal position and wondering why this is happening to me, the victim mindset. So it's really everybody's choice on what they're open to experiencing, and if they think that they can even continue with a toxic situation. They may say, there's no way I can. I'm going to, end up broken if I stay here. So yeah, the individual should always do what's best for them.
I love that. I love that, because it gives us that That sense of agency and control instead of, kind of schooling that no, no, you should definitely leave. I mean, it all depends on our personal choice and what exactly we want for ourselves. Um, and Shannon, you actually had your experience dealing with toxic bosses. How did you navigate through that?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I've had several of them, unfortunately.
Okay.
The very first one I had was actually when I first got hired at a little boutique consulting firm out of Chicago. And the very first day, one of the executives was taking us around for like an hour and talking with us. Well, I'll never forget, he took me and another hire into his office and he was telling us a story. And he was a great storyteller. So I was engrossed in the story. And all of a sudden, he stops, looks at me, and says, "Why do you have such a stupid look on your face?"
Oh my
And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I was 20, maybe 20 years old."
God.
So that set the tone, for the whole time. I've got lots of other stories from that. But at the time, I was just starting out and I tried really hard to get this job. So I didn't want to just give it up. So I made the choice to go through and to build up the resilience. At the time, I wish I could say like I was always 100% cucumber, but that's not true because we're humans too. So at the time, I knew it really wasn't about me. I had learned those things early, but yeah, it was challenging because if that is what set the tone for the first day, you can imagine what happened after that.
Totally. Oh my god, I would have frozen. Frozen.
I did. I was like, uh, because you're telling a good story. I don't know, but yeah, people are funny creatures.
Yeah. But I think, as you mentioned, before for the previous question, that, sometimes, a bit of adversity is necessary for building up the resilience.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I built a ton there. Like, after that job, I don't really remember much bothering me because it was such a fire, a trial by fire and drinking from the fire hose and all the things. So, yeah, it was difficult for me to get rattled after that.
Love that. Love that. Okay, and Shannon, another interesting part of your work is that you help people move from corporate to um solopreneur or founder life. And I think that is something that is kind of, gaining its importance, especially after pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, okay, what is one hard truth about that transition that, people do not usually want to actually hear, because it's kind of a fantasy that, I'm gonna quit my 9 to 5. I'm gonna do something on my own. I'm gonna have this freedom and everything.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I have been an entrepreneur for decades. Um, Sometimes people are wired for that kind of drive. I don't know why I am. I just am. Like I get jazzed about trying. Like I have four businesses. So, and I have ones I want to do, but I don't have all that time. So, I think part of it is you got to be honest with yourself as to why you're doing something. Is it, I mean, even if it's to escape corporate, that's a perfectly fine reason.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like you got to choose your hard. It's hard in corporate for certain reasons, bureaucracy, politics, you know, all of the corporate streamlining and bandwidth conversations and words. But the other side of it is, well, it's hard also to generate your own business because it's not just about even the thing you do, whether it be any kind of form of coaching or whatnot, or starting a business, but you've got to do all of it, especially in the beginning. That's marketing, sales, all. And it's a lot. And there's no hours. You just have to do enough so that you get the results you want. So I would say to really be honest about how much effort and energy someone can put into it. And in that same vein, specific to LinkedIn, hey guys, I wish it was so easy to generate a business off of social media. Like you could just post and poof, get 20 clients, right? It does not work that way. There's so much that goes into every single post, engagement, comment, all the things. So it is possible, but I wouldn't call it easy. You have to have a certain amount of tenacity. You have to have a beefy anterior mid-cingulate cortex to be able to run a profitable business on your own and stay out of corporate. So I would say probably that.
That's so right. And this is something that, I'm seeing firsthand because um even, f- when it comes to podcasting also, like people have there are misconceptions, and then there is such a beautiful, a kind of a community based awareness that putting up one episode out there, reaching out, making, kind of working on putting those efforts into how you're connecting with your listeners, whether your content is working out or not, whether the effort that you're
Mhm.
putting up behind the curtain, behind the scenes, whether it's fruitful or not. I mean, there is so much of not only your money or your time invested, but emotionally you're also invested into it because it is a very dynamic, industry. Social media, influencer marketing, or podcasting. It's very dynamic. So I think that is something that needs a lot of clarity and resilience.
Yeah, and podcasting especially, like I have heard that there's a lot more than I can imagine that goes into podcasting. So, golf clap to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Super. So, oh my goodness. Okay. So, in the interest of the time, Shannon, if listeners, I'm very sure they would like to connect with you, what would be the best medium to do that?
Look, I think right now it might be best just to go on LinkedIn. You can kind of see what I'm about. I'm Shannon Smith with some letters behind the name JDMS. I also am happy to talk about sales if you want to talk about that, LinkedIn branding. I'm also doing keynote speaking now. So if you want to find me, LinkedIn is a great spot. You can also find me at brainhacksbyshannon.com, but that site is going to be under construction soon.
Wonderful. Listeners, I'm going to have all the details in the show notes. Connect with Shannon. 50,000 plus followers is not a joke. So do make sure that you connect with Shannon. Feel free to share your thoughts about this conversation, your experiences, and I think if I think if I can wrap this up, let's see, let's try it out. I think it's such a real conversation because it's not just about bad bosses' dreams or dream jobs, but I think it's also about how it costs our bodies and brains to keep tolerating misalignment. So, Shannon,
Mhm.
thank you so much for this really, really, really real and pragmatic take, not only on workplace culture, toxic bosses, but on brain and our physical health and everything. Thank you so much.
Sana, thank you so much for your time today. You are a gem, and I've enjoyed our chat.
Super. Thank you so much, Sharon. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for devoting your time to listen to this conversation on the BizBlend podcast. And if you want to go deeper into Shannon's world, connect with her on LinkedIn. Refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And if this episode hit home, share it with that friend or colleague who keeps saying, "Oh my God, I hate my job. I hate my job," on repeat, or that founder who secretly dreads opening LinkedIn because sales feels like panic, not possibility. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, signing off from BizBlend. Thank you.